This is the Breakfast Leadership Podcast. Boundaries or burnout, you make the choice. Here's your host, Michael Levitt. Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Podcast. I'm Michael Levitt, and today I have a really special guest that I know personally, which is always fun when you have opportunities to talk with people that you know. I have Mike Rosenberg from WPV Corp. WPV are world leaders in creating solutions for harassment, sexual harassment, and workplace violence. Not that we have any of that in our culture today, unfortunately, but we do. So this organization exists to help your organization do things the right way. So, Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. I appreciate having, and it's always fun to talk to you, and a person whom I personally respect enormously, and that says a lot because I don't use that phrase very much.
Well, I appreciate that, and the feeling is definitely mutual. You know, the work that you're doing and I'm doing definitely has a lot of synchronicities together. So, looking forward to our conversation today. So, tell the audience a little bit about WPV Corp and you know why you launched it and the work that you're doing today.
Well, WPV is a technology-based solution, complete comprehensive solution to workplace violence, harassment, sexual harassment. The idea is that, you know, we've created a series of tools based on a 3-pillar system. And the 3 pillars are very easy to understand. One is prevention. You know, an ounce of prevention is always worth a pound of cure. And if we can stop things before they happen, that's always better for both organizations and individuals. The second is reaction. The second pillar is reaction. Things do happen. Whether you have things in place or not, you're always going to have things that happen. And so you have to be able to react to them in real time, you know, in a confidential way and in a way that, you know, both protects the individual and protects the organization. And then the third area is enforcement. So the technology, you know, we do workplace violence investigations, things like that, but the technology also helps track any incidents so that people know that they don't get lost in this shuffle and that they're addressed completely according to law. And I think that's, you know, and as I said, it's a very simple solution using technology and using people who are trained in that area to help prevent and respond to incidents in real time.
It's a great product because I think one of the things that I've seen in working with corporations and organizations is whenever there's improper behavior by either employees or management, oftentimes people feel trapped because they don't feel that they can comfortably report it because they don't want to lose their own job, or they don't want to cause a big rift. And we know in Canada and Ontario, there's been legislation, and even in the States now, thankfully, that are popping up across the country to address harassment. And I think one of the things I really want to hammer home with the audience today is the importance of having an external group or investigator take a look at things, because oftentimes there's biases when it comes to investigations, whether it's nepotism, favoritism. Again, maybe the HR director doesn't want to get involved with a situation that could be problematic and sweep it under the rug. And we've seen that. We see it in the news all the time of organizations that unfortunately have either swept things under the rug or paid people off to basically not have to deal with these things. So talk a little bit more about the importance of having a third-party investigator when situations like this arise.
No, I agree with you 100%, because what the system does is that it creates an independent third-party ombudsman in a real-world sense. So an independent third-party ombudsman is somebody who will address the issues and create accountability that is independent of senior management. I mean, where does harassment exist? I mean, you don't see the janitor harassing the CEO or sexually harassing the CEO. Workplace violence and workplace violence itself, even especially in healthcare, is a huge issue. And a lot of times it's more expedient for senior management to sweep it under the rug. because it can affect their funding. It can affect a number of things. What we do as a third party is we hold everybody accountable equally. And, you're right, Michael. I mean, you have the senior person in HR. They may be a great person, but I mean, Harvey Weinstein at Weinstein Company had a senior vice president of human resources. And I mean, what would have happened if that senior vice president went to Harvey Weinstein and said, you know what, we've got complaints of sexual harassment, we've gotten complaints of inappropriate behavior, and we're going to investigate it. And, we think that there may be, serious cause for your behavior. What do you think Harvey'd say? He'd say, thank you very much. Don't let the door hit you on the way out. I mean, this is the problem. And the fundamental problem, especially with harassment, sexual harassment, is it's about power differential. And, it isn't about gender. People think it's about, gender. It's not. It's about power differential. And you see that in the news. I mean, you see when there's a power differential for whatever reason, whether it's a big star, whether it's a senior executive, or things like that. And even in the area of workplace violence, which we've done work as Michael, within healthcare, especially where, especially in the nursing profession, which deals with, workplace violence, very, and people literally physically being assaulted, that there's the inclination that let's just make this go away. And, because it doesn't really impact the senior executives in the same direct way that it impacts frontline workers. And you see that in retail, and you see that in, restaurants and the food industry. The people who really have, most danger in workplace violence are not the senior people. They're the most junior people. So by creating that third party ombudsman, you create a system that's safe, that's confidential, within the law and within all the previews of all the various laws. And you hit on the head again. I mean, the laws right now, there's a proliferation of new laws. And right now, I would have said, if you asked me 2 years ago, or even a year and a half ago, who had the most comprehensive laws around workplace violence and harassment, sexual harassment, I would have said Ontario with Bill 168 and Bill 132. But now I'd have to say it's California, and it's growing. And now there's even bills in the United States that mandate across the entire U.S. things like, you won't be able to do private settlements anymore, confidential settlements. And so what that's going to mean is your insurance companies are going to start putting a lot of pressure where they used to want to settle these things. They're not going to settle. They're going to fight them in court, and their premiums are going to go up. And there's a whole bunch of problems happening. And, I am glad, because I think that it's time that this action has been done. And the only way that you can really completely mitigate your risk is to have somebody else assume that risk. And that's what WPV does. We I don't want to say we take on all your risk, but we share the risk with you. And we help mitigate the risk because we do everything in our powers to prevent it from happening, to create a confidential system, and to be completely independent of the corporate structure and the corporate what am I trying to think of, the corporate org chart. And we're completely independent of the org chart. We don't there's nobody in the organization who and our contracts ensure that our jobs are not dependent on the whim of one person in the organization.
And that's crucial. And the nurse bullying component, I take dear to heart. I spoke at the Becker's Healthcare Conference in May of 2018, and we talked about nurse bullying and burnout and how the industry in healthcare, especially, it's one of the most dangerous jobs out there is to be a nurse. And
actually, it's as far as workplace violence goes, it's number one, not even close.
Yeah,
I mean, within Canada, and the Intern Nurses Association sent me this statistic, and it was interesting. Health nurses have 6 times more days lost due to workplace violence than manufacturing, mining, and retail combined.
That's an alarming stat. And we're seeing new nurses that are a couple of years into their career leaving the profession because of this.
Well, and one of the things we've been working on, which I think is exciting in healthcare, is how do you handle, for instance, workplace violence when you're dealing with dementia or Alzheimer's patients, or or people who are not legally responsible for their actions, whether it's in a psychotic episode. And so we've been starting to work toward how we can apply this when the workplace violence is directed at in healthcare by people who are not competent. And so this is something we've kind of started, it's within our preview of workplace violence, but it's kind of a new area that we've really started collaborating with some top experts in geriatrics from McMaster University in their medical school and some of the folks around that. Because again, I mean, you have, workplace violence is the three components, right? You have harassment, you have sexual harassment, but you also have actual violence where people safety is in danger, and healthcare is definitely the top area for that. And it's going to get worse.
Yeah, and especially with the geriatric population aging, as we know, in the next 18 years in Ontario anyway, the population over age 65 is going to double and over age 90 will triple. So all of these nuances that we see today will double and triple unless we do something about it. One question I have for you, too, that jumped out at me just now is, in going through all of these examples and the work that you're doing, has anything surprised you as far as discoveries? My hunch is probably not knowing you, but was there anything that's jumped? Because, one of my favorite quotes is from the late Detroit Pistons head basketball coach Chuck Daly. And his quote was, "A pessimist is an optimist with experience."
I hate to say this, but I shake my head because nothing surprises me. I guess what surprises me most is how much corporate executives will virtue signal, but when it comes time when you offer them a full solution, they will run the opposite way. And how much they still want to, no matter what's happened, they still want to sweep all this stuff under the rug. And as I said, it's even just getting an investigation sometimes. I've got one that I've been looking at, and they've contacted me 3-4 months ago, and they're just trying to, and this thing has been going on for 7 years. And you're kind of like, holy cow, why didn't you deal with this 7 years ago? It's reactive. It's a reactive culture as opposed to a proactive culture.
Yeah, and unfortunately, in this line of work, oftentimes, even with the work that I do with people that are burned out, is they're coming to you way long into the process, depending on what part of North America you're from. And they are just a mess. And if they would have been proactive, they still could have come to us and got the help that they needed to prevent something. But oftentimes in this role, we show up with the mop bucket and the mop, and we do a lot of cleanup work first, and then we start working in tandem with the organization to implement ways to make sure that employee behavior and management behavior is all on the same page. And that's something that takes time to transform. But again, the risk mitigation is a huge component of it, because again, the organizations, the reason why they sweep things under the rug is they don't want to end up in the front page or on TMZ or in the Twitter feed or anywhere else, because news like that tends to spread like wildfire.
Well, and I think that's the biggest difference I've seen in the last 2 years. And I think you're right, Michael. I think that's one of the heartening components is that, like, when you ask me what surprises me, I mean, nothing about human behavior anymore surprises me. I mean, as I said, it's, they're bullies at every level. There are people who, abuse their positions of power. There are people who, they have gotten where they have gotten by being the worst kind of people you can be. And I think even, I think it's interesting, even your own case, taking kind of an organization that had, very high turnover rates, had issues of morale and things like that. And the work you've done as a leader within your organization and the work we've done together, you start to look at even the benefit of it. And the benefit of it, of being preventative for the organization, is it helps you attract good talent. It helps you retain good talent, and that is becoming more and more critical. And I think you've seen this in the last 6 to 9 months, as the economy has started to heat up. More people have jobs. Well, guess what? If more people have jobs and they have options, they will leave that organization's bully, and they're going to end up with just people who can't get work, and it's going to start impacting any organization's bottom line, even if it's in whatever sector it is, because, and I think even it's going to be even more critical in healthcare, because healthcare right now is at a record low unemployment rate worldwide, right? Because the population's aging, and it's only going to get more critical. And so you're going to start to see more demand for talent, especially, and the first thing people will respond to, I mean, it's Maslow. The first area you respond to is your basic needs, and safety is the next rung up. It goes basic, feeding yourself, things like that. And so if there's a job, people put up with it because they need the money. But once they start to have the money, the next level up is safety. If they're not safe in that organization, they will leave, and they will go somewhere else in 2 minutes. And you start to see that with turnover rates.
Yeah, and you nailed it right on the head. What will happen is you start getting people in place that aren't quite the right fit or the right culture match or the skill set. Because if your organization isn't operating in a best practice type of way, then you're going to lose the good talent to other places. And it will definitely create some challenges in the healthcare sector as well, especially in the U.S. And I anticipate that we will see this in Canada as well, not to alarm any of my Canadian friends. But we're seeing several hospitals close in the U.S. There's a lot of consolidation going on. So what will happen is, the really good talent are going to go to the really good health systems. And depending on where you live, you may not get good health care. I've seen that up close and personal with some situations that my parents dealt with in the last 6 months as far as the health care that they've received. Both my parents had been hospitalized in the last 9 months. My dad's experience was absolutely incredible. My mother's was atrocious. And I'll leave it at that. But it's one of those challenges that we face. And what's going to happen is, depending on where you live, you may have some really, really good top talent, or you may not. And that all goes down to how the organization is behaving and how they are running their organizations in all different facets, not just in behavior, but the strength of the leadership and the demands of everything that's going on.
Well, and that's a great point, because you see from every survey that's been done on millennials, right? And this is the next generation coming up here, who's going to be taking the jobs. The millennials really are very focused on a lot of things like, lifestyle issues. And they're very focused on, a lot of ethical issues. So the things that matter to people are literally going to be, for a lot of these millennials, is how they're treated. And you're going to get the best people. And I mean, it's natural inclination. I mean, if you hate your job and you hate where you work, you may love your work, but hate where you work. And if you hate where you work and you're in demand, you'll find a place that treats you well, that you're safe. And, you'll travel for that, because we live in a global society now. I mean, the idea, where you grow up in a town and you live in that town, and you can't ever leave that town. I mean, now you can commute from that town, in 800 different ways to anywhere you want to go. And so I think that this is a key element. And so organizations that start to put these things in place, I always say it's the carrot and the stick. I mean, obviously you have a plethora of legislation that is the stick. If you don't do this, like you said, you'll be shamed in the court of public opinion, which is going to cost you customers and everything else, like i.e. Uber, is a good example of that. Where really Uber, kind of had the meltdown and has lost a lot of talent, and now they're being very much taken over. But, their market share has been eaten up by Lyft, because of a lot of people were upset how, they're within the sexual harassment and the harassment realm. But at the same time, the carrot is that, when you start to look for the best people, they're going to start looking at, if your salary compensation is, within the realm of where it should be at, they're going to start looking at things like, what is it like to work here? Am I going to be safe? Am I going to be protected? Am I going to, am I going to have to, are you going to have a zero tolerance? And are you going to have systems in place that protect me, that I know protect me? Because again, if you tell us, like one of the things I think that surprised me a little bit, and I hear this story from several organizations, we have great internal systems. And that's my favorite oxymoron. Great and internal, I don't care how great your internal system are, but one organization who was bragging about their system was basically telling me that you, and this is a big corporation, said, if you're you want to make a harassment complaint, you have to go to your manager first. And then they determine whether it's reasonable to proceed. I said, well, what if the manager is harassing you? Well, then you can go to the senior manager. So I'm like, okay, great. And so the manager who's buddies with the senior management is going to decide whether the harassment is. Well, you're seeing turnover in that organization because people look and say, I don't want to work here. And they wonder why they have turnover issues. So, because there is competition for good talent.
And rightfully so, there should be, because organizations need to create the right environment that's supportive for their employees. Doesn't matter if they're baby boomers or millennials or us forgotten Gen Xers. We definitely want to make sure that our environments are safe, because we spend a ton of time at work, and we want everything that we need. And we're coming to work with sometimes some personal challenges and baggage and other things that are impacting our personal lives. But we come into work, and work can be a place where we can focus on something else besides challenges that we're facing at home. And if the work environment is toxic or horrible, then where do you turn? And it really creates some problems for high stress and burnout and everything else, because you're getting it from every direction. You feel like a piñata.
Michael, I couldn't agree with you more, because you take it even further. Is that you take the stress out from work at home. Now it becomes domestic abuse. It ruins so many lives. It impacts on so many lives, and it's because if you can't be there because you're dealing with it at work and you take it out at home, all of a sudden your children and their lives are impacted. Your home life's impacted. Your health is impacted. It's a domino effect. And so, if you can come to work and feel good and feel safe about where you are, and it almost doesn't matter what your job is. It matters about the environment. And as I said, I guess because I used to be in the film industry many years ago, and actually had my screenplay optioned by Harvey Weinstein, ironically enough, at one point. You see this, and you ask people, do you like working for Weinstein, or before that Miramax? Well, of course, because they're in the film industry, and it's prestigious, and it's glamorous, and they're making good money. So he preyed on that. And he's not the only one who preyed on that. There's a lot of people who preyed on that in positions of power, right? And so, it was, I always wanted to do this, and then you're in the middle of hell, but you love what you do. But the people you have to go around to do it for are, literally like the devil. Like you have to make your bargain with the devil. So, and again, it impacts every element of their lives, and you see this all over. And I can't emphasize enough that, and again, going back to that third party ombudsman, is that the idea has to come from external. If you have no external force no external enforcement, could you imagine a society without police? Right? If we just said, we can handle all our domestic problems on our own, and within the home, we don't really need police around here. Could you imagine society without police? Because our police are an independent third-party force that enforces the law. And this is, but yet we have corporations and organizations that do not have that system, and they're paying a price for it.
That's a great analogy about the police force and being an independent third party, which they are. and it keeps things in check. And I think organizations like yours can help organizations keep themselves in check, protect the organizations, protecting the employees, protecting the board of directors, reduce liability,
lower insurance rates. I mean, I'm speaking to an insurance panel in a few weeks. I'm doing another webinar for the Professional Liability Underwriters Society as a follow-up to our one on after Weinstein. We did it in January, and we're talking about the rates, and the rates are going up. And because whether it's employee liability insurance or directors and officers insurance, and I think that one of the things, especially for organizations, is, and this is a new thing, which they're doing in New York State, but the Attorney General in New York State is going after Weinstein's board of directors on a criminal level, for aiding and abetting rape. I mean, because they said that they should have known. And so that they should have known and that they knew and they didn't do anything about it. And because they didn't do anything about it, they aided and abetted a criminal act. So now you're going to see directors and officers being held liable, not just civilly, but criminally. And within Ontario, within Canada, now one of the big changes that, which is under the radar, but I think that one of the biggest changes isn't even just the law, but the fact that the courts have ruled that harassment is now a civil tort. So that's a big deal. So now if you have a tort under civil law, that means you can sue somebody and you can sue an organization and you can sue an individual for it. And that's already set a precedence with Boucher versus Walmart Canada and Merlin versus the Attorney General's office. This is now a civil tort. That means that if you are doing egregious behavior, you can lose your home and your organization. And if and they can go after you, not just for a few penalties, but they can go after your organization for multi-millions of dollars.
It's definitely a game changer. And it's also a situation to really install accountability in every level of an organization, from the front lines all the way to boards of directors, to make sure that we're playing nice in the sandbox and we're doing things the right way, and we're treating people with respect and kindness, and we're not doing all of the gossiping and bullying and flying monkeys. For all you mental health workers, you know what that means, and all the other stuff that goes on in organizations on a daily basis. So this has been awesome. We could probably talk for a month on this.
I know, Michael. Sure. We'll have to do a follow-up. And I really do, I want to thank you for having me on, and make sure we can also visit the website of WPVcorp.com. And if it's okay, I'm going to set up a link between us.
Absolutely. By all means. Yeah. And we'll put all of that stuff in the show notes. Is there any other things you'd like to share with the audience today before we go?
I guess, really the best prevention is common sense. I know it sounds kind of silly, but, really just treat people the way you want to be treated. And guess what, or the way you'd want your kids to be treated. And guess what? You're probably going to prevent all this stuff from happening.
Yeah. Amen to that. So, Michael, thank you again for your time today. I really appreciate you and
Michael,
the work
thank
that
you.
you're doing. And until next time, be well. Hey, it's Michael again. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I really appreciate it. If you're like many people, you're dealing with some significant stress and possibly approaching burnout. I know how you feel. In 2009, my burnout led to a year of worst-case scenarios. I do not want that to happen to you. If you go to breakfastleadership.com, you can register for a free webinar on burnout prevention, as well as get a free checklist to have successful mornings. Start off each day the right way. Again, that's at breakfastleadership.com. Also, since you are a loyal podcast listener, I'm asking you to like, rate, and review my podcast on iTunes. I look at all the reviews and appreciate your comments, and it helps other potential listeners discover the content I have on the show. I appreciate you, and thanks again for listening.